Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Before we begin, I want to review a few meeting logistics. All attendees are in a listen-only mode. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it in the chat window at any time. In addition, a recorded copy of this webinar will be available online should you have to leave early or should you want to share the webinar with others. Let me begin by introducing our speaker today, Asher Moser. Dr. Moser is the Associate Director of Student Affairs for the Medical School for International Health and the head of the Pediatric Hematology Clinic at Soroka University Medical Center in Beersheba. He traveled to Nepal in May of 2015 following the devastating earthquake there. Many of the hospitals and equipment have been devastated by the earthquake, leaving countless patients unattended. Dr. Moser directed the setup of an improvised neonatal ward for recently born preemies who were without an incubator due to the hospital damage. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Moser.
And good afternoon to all my listeners out there. It all started back in April, the 25th of April this last year. There was a devastating earthquake at the magnitude of 7.8 at the Richter scale, eventually causing many casualties, as nobody knew at first how much. And later on, it was estimated to be around 11,000. And as in all disasters, people start looking for who can help. And the entire world kind of came together to help the people of Nepal. Israel has a very soft belly for Nepalese and anything that happens there, because they were the first state in Asia in 1960 who recognized the existence of the state of Israel. All other Asian states came later, and forever we are thankful for the Nepalese, and whenever they need help, there's a lot of people who would come to help. So upon arrival on Nepal, which is a very old country with a lot of historical places that they tried to preserve, this is before the earthquake, this is what you get at the airport. There's all these stickers that show what is happening around the Kathmandu area, which is the capital of Nepal. And you go to try and help, and you get this. I took this picture at the airport. First, you have to know what the situation is, who's dead, who's injured, where are they displaced, what is destroyed or damaged, and then what the priorities are. And you can see that the priorities have changed from the time they first posted this note until the time we saw it, which was somewhat 7 days after the major earthquake, until we got this envoy together. And at this point, the major priorities was to find shelter for those who are still displaced and their house destroyed, because we're talking about May, and the monsoons are going to be in about 6 weeks, and they're going to tear down anything that there is. There's health problems that need to be addressed. People are still out there injured. And then there's food logistics, which were less of a problem, because they had their own food in the villages that could maintain for another week or so. The logistics on the right side are for those who are coming in to help. What kind of money we need, ATMs, where's sales, transportation. Of course, all cars and helicopters have been used up at this point, so we need to kind of arrange our own. We were lucky that we had a person on ground who secured us a couple of jeeps and a bus. You'll see later in one of the. Okay, so this is what happens when an earthquake hits a 10-story building. It pancakes. Virtually, it kind of collapses one on top of the other. And what you see are the top floors are still intact, where the bottom floors, probably nobody is going to survive them. This is an actual building that had pancaked, and the guy on the left is looking below to a kind of a mouse hole underneath that chair, whereas the last live survivor was rescued 5.5 days after the earthquake. That is about a day before we arrived. A previous team from Israel, from our company aid project, came in and dragged out the lady from under the building. The reason she survived probably is because it rained a few days after, and she had a little bit of water dripping on her. Not very happy because she was crushed under the body of her uncle. But she survived, and she was brought to the hospital and lived. So they put us on a bus. There's 8 of us. I'm the one on your right-hand side on the first seat. On the left is the coordinator. He's speaking on the phone all the time because he's always coordinating things other than others. The one behind him is an internist. He is 74 years old. There's an orthopedic surgeon there in the back, another internist, a couple of midwives, and a nurse from an intensive care unit. We all packed up this bus. There's a lot of stuff also on the roof, and we hit the roads. So what the Nepalese would do when the earthquake hit is they would kind of sift through the debris. Whatever is usable, they'd pile up in usable material, and whatever is not would kind of sit in the street as rubble. Nobody would take care of that. This is the Jeep where we had kind of additional equipment. Those are the bags. We had 23 of those orange black bags, a total overweight of 250 kilos we had to pay to Turkish Airlines in order to get us to the place. You can see that Nepal is a right-hand driving place. Go to the streets, there's virtually things are damaged beyond any control. In most of the urban areas that were hit were the people who died, and in the rural areas where the one-story buildings were being, so there was nothing left of them. We had to get to our places with any transportation that could be afforded, buses, motorbikes, many with jeeps, and there was one we actually had to be helicoptered in because there was no other way to get to that place. Helicopters were scarce, but for a substantial fee, they were willing to negotiate and bring us there. This tiny one up here had to do 3 rounds to take us and our equipment from the closest place, which was Gorkha, into the high Tibetan Chinese border area of Nepal. Of course, we had to get out of there also by helicopter. So we had to put in all our equipment into this tiny thing. It could take about 4 people and 500 kilos or 500 kilos at a time. We had, in addition to the 8 of us and the coordinator, we had 4 Nepalese nurses and 1 doctor who helped us, especially with translation and communicating to the local population. So you can imagine this serene and nice neighborhood that we had to work with. In this particular point, the car or the bus could carry us no further than a dam that was down in the valley, and we had to hike the 2.5 hours up with our personal equipment. Of course, there were Sherpas who helped us drag the medical equipment. They were a little stronger than us, and of course, they made the journey twice before we made it up once into the top of the mountain. Because we are a little bit older, to mention that the average age in Nepal, they're very young people. There's only 5% of the population who actually are older than 55 years of age. So the majority are under 25. This is what we see on the way. This is a rural place, and the houses collapsed. What you can see here is the awful stench of the dead were buried under the buildings. They did take care to drag out the bodies during the first and second day after the earthquake, and depending if they're Buddhist or Hinduist and what cult they are. So some were buried and some were burnt. But what they left under the buildings and they didn't take out is the sheep and cattle and goats, which usually dwell in the kind of under the buildings, and when they collapsed, they were dead there. It was a terrible smell going through these places because we couldn't, and they were working there. another pancake building. This is kind of what's left of the roof. Serene pictures of doors and windowsills and kind of half-ate dinners that were left. I like this picture most of what I took there. They took out the bed. The grandmother's sitting there on the bed. The television is out, waiting to be dragged to or built a new location in the village. Some of the village were actually wiped out. There's nothing left in the village that I'm showing you down below here. Every single shack has been destroyed beyond repair, and they'll have to do it by themselves. On the other hand, there were other villages, maybe the other side of the mountain, which were intact. Nothing really happened to them. I think it's a matter of location, what side of the mountain you are. This is the medical team that we consisted of. These are the Nepalese, of course, those with the darker faces. These are the Nepalese nurses who came to assist us. One of the tasks we had to do was immediately kind of sift through who is in danger, needs to be treated faster than others. As a pediatrician, I was to get children. I had the assistance of a Nepalese nurse to help me doing the translations. Most of the children had fevers, diarrheas, runny noses, things that are common in pediatrics, but since they had no medical facilities and no people coming in for days and no one knew when would be the next time, so they were brought over to me. The older people were seen by the internists who were happy to give some assistance. Most of this was not injury related, although some was. This is a very, very small baby, kind of a month or two old, who had fever, and we were looking for the source of the infection. If needed, so we put on a cast and send them off to the nearest hospital for evaluation or for emergency surgery. Although we had an orthopedic surgeon with us, he could not perform field operations, so these needed to be kind of cleared over to where things could be done somewhat better. This is an example of a field operation we had to perform on this young lady who had multiple abscesses in her both feet. This is after the orthopedic surgeon had drained all these abscesses, and the nurse is kind of calming the girl before we put up the plasters and send her off to her place. So this is an interesting story. This child came in with a crush injury of his right thigh, the one you can see in the picture. And it was determined that the crush injury, it wasn't open, it was a closed injury, so there wasn't any bleeding or infection at the point, but it had to be aligned and plastered in order for the leg to heal in a correct way, because otherwise it would be crooked for the rest of the life. This child came in a basket. They carried the logs and wood around in baskets, and this one came in with his father. Brought him. The father is on the right. He's holding an IV bag. I am giving him some anti-pain medication because the mere replacement, taking him out of his box and putting him on a table, was so painful that we needed to demedicate him before we put him on, and then we need 6 hands in order to align the thigh and put the plaster on, and only then we could reinsert him into his basket and send him happily back home, hoping that maybe in a week or two he could be able to have an x-ray and someone would look at the cast and maybe remove the plaster. But that's kind of one we saved from a real crush injury. Other people who came in had other priorities. This is already in the northern area near the Chinese border, where the Nepalese carry the children around in baskets and in sacks. They are very beautiful children. They are of the nicest around. You can see the slopes of the mountains. This is how they travel around. So this is our setup camp all the way up in the mountains. This is 6 o'clock in the morning. We're trying to kind of start organize for the day. Medicine is delivered between 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening. When it turns dark, everybody goes home, regardless of how sick they're supposed to be. It's we're walking around in shorts because it's rather a warm day going to be. There's this fog in the background that prohibits us from seeing those beautiful mountains. There's a few Nepalese soldiers who are around and helping the triage nurses kind of see who's sick and who's less sick. These are the people already waiting 6 o'clock in the morning to be seen by us. Give it a few minutes and there'll be more and more. The interesting thing about the customs in Nepal that we had to understand is that men are served first. So they are in the front line. Women and children get served after all the men get seen or being treated. So me as a pediatrician at the beginning, I had no work, and I started wondering why. And they told me that we're waiting for all the men to be seen. So at that point, I had to send out one of my nursing staff to scan through the line of the females and children to see who was in dire need, so we can start helping them before the others, before all the other men have been seen. This is our makeshift pharmacy. When we opened all our bags, there's all the medications we thought we might be able or need to deliver were all brought up. Of course, this is on back or by helicopter, and now it's all open, waiting to be delivered. On the left, you can see this is the local health post, which has been damaged and destroyed by the earthquake. The health post personnel was not actually a nurse. She had about 2 months of training in kind of paramedics. She's the one who is sick also. She got injured by this disaster, so she's not around to assist also. This is our makeshift home. This tent could sleep 10 adult people. Later on, we will donate it for the neonatal intensive care unit we made out there. At some point, the lines were so large and the people were kind of clinging on us, so we had to put in a little fence to stop them from kind of approaching us too fast. We needed to kind of make order them to go through the triage station. Okay, so this is again, the females are on the right side of the line, the males are on the left. They're waiting to be being treated. This is the one we want to pay attention to her. She is the sickest. Here she is. She'll be seen an hour or two after, when things come clear that she needs attention. The males are still waiting. Triage has been happening. The way we can identify this particular individual is because she has this Hello Kitty with an English mistake on it. So this is the Nepalese nurse, assisted by the Israeli nurse and by the Nepalese soldier, trying to speak to the Nepalese population. They don't share a language. It's a dialect that happens more closely to Chinese than the Nepalese. So even the Nepalese nurses can't speak the language. The Nepalese soldiers know somewhat, so there's a triple language barrier that we're trying to solve. And suddenly we find out that some of these young ladies speak Arabic, and some of us speak Arabic because they've been serving in the Gulf area as maids, assistants, and some of them came back traumatized from there, but they know Arabic. So this is little babies. Most of them are generally healthy, so we're happy and we're having fun with them. But some of them are very, very sick. So we're back to examining babies. This is not Hello Kitty yet. This elderly lady is sitting on what we call our examination table. This is a makeshift school bench. We brought the clean paper, and that's the best we can offer in order to help them. This is the organization that sent us out, IsraAid, which are currently working in Lesbos on the Greek island, taking the refugees coming in from Turkey. Someone came in and said they can't see, so we put up this eye exam. Whatever we can help, we did at the time. This is our orthopedic surgeon. This is the other internist helping him kind of go through the procedures. So here's Hello Kitty. This child is 1 month old, and he came in with a fever and bulging of his anterior fontanelle, which translated to pediatric medicine means he has probable meningitis and he's in a life-threatening disorder. So we're in the field out there in the Chinese mountains. We get this life-threatening disorder, and for a 1 month old baby, we immediately insert an IV. This is the yellow thing in here. We give antibiotics. We try to call in for a helicopter to pick him up to the nearest hospital because he probably won't survive if he doesn't get the proper treatment. And no helicopters around. We can't find anyone to help. There's a few helicopters that are coming in and out of this particular village, but they belong to the World Food Organization, kind of a derivative of the UN, and they refuse to take passengers no matter what's the problem. There's also a Doctors Without Borders helicopters wandering around the area who also doesn't have the right time to come and pick up our sick baby. So this baby will stay in our camp for the next 48 hours. We are the intensive care unit for him. All 8 of us and the 4 Nepalese nurses are looking after him and trying to help him survive his dire disease. He actually did survive. You wonder if we weren't there at the time, what would have happened? Probably not a good fate. As an act of when the mother came back 2 days later, she left the child for the nights and slept with her families. She was so grateful. She said, "What can I do in order to commemorate this?" And she decided to rename the child after me. So this is the little tag of the name. This is my name. Now I know I'm called in Nepalese 31212. That's how you read if someone told me that is the actual way to read my name in Nepalese. So somewhere in the outskirts of Tibetan mountains, I have a relative, Asher Hamung, who is there. So these are other pictures that we took on the way. This is from the streets of Gorkha. They're trying to teach the local population birth control methods, what is available. This is a very big wall, and it's all painted on the outside of the hospital. This is my 74-year friend of the internist who's walking the mountains of Nepal, learning something. This is another story. Up in the mountains, there's a lot of people who suffer from pulmonary diseases. And modern medicine already knows how to deliver good medicines to people who suffer from breathing disorders. And it has to be given, most of it has to be given through an inhalation, a simple inhalation. But there's no electricity up in the mountains, so you can't give inhalations if you are requiring some kind of an electricity. So we had to figure out a way to deliver this inhalation medicine without electricity. So we brought a few bicycle pumps and we connected them to these hoses, and the medication is in place. And now all you have to do is have someone pump this little bicycle pump and deliver the medication. They were so excited. We left them the bumps and the equipment and the tubing and so you don't always need electricity in order to deliver good medicine, even in the remote mountains of Nepal. This will be the last story. This is about the neonatal unit we put up. So after a week in Nepal, we had kind of a day off in Kathmandu, the capital, and we went to tour a few of the places. And suddenly there's a second earthquake. It was slightly less. This was only 7.4 at the Richter scale, but we had everybody got very, very scared. There weren't many casualties in this one. However, right after this, this hospital, which serves as kind of a Western hospital for those who can afford the money and come in, had a group of prematures, neonates that were born for Israeli couples living in Israel, and there was, not nice to say, but there's kind of a farm of pregnant Indian females inseminated by these Israeli couples. Most of them are gay, with oocytes donated from Ukraine, and the whole procedure was done in Malaysia, some kind of a combination that allowed them, these young Indian females, to keep a pregnancy. They got paid what is considered for them a lifetime income of about $5,000, and they live on this farm or on this place, and most of them, since they're Indian, small, tiny, young females, not most, many of them cannot carry a pregnancy to the end, and they have premature babies because the genetics of the parents are probably much larger than the wombs of the mothers. So right after the second earthquake, there's 4 of them living in this hospital, and within minutes they grab the tubing and they run out of the hospital, and now they're in the parking lot. 4 tiny premature babies, each one in the hands of the father, sitting in a tiny Hyundai i10 car. We don't even have them in America; they're so small. Each one of them is hooked to a IV, and the engine is running to keep them warm because they can't. That's their main default. They can't keep themselves warm, and they're sitting there waiting for something to happen. So they're outside in the parking lot, inside this car, waiting for something to happen. And we hear that there's these preemies have been injured, or the hospital has been shaken. We run over to the location. This is what we see at first. And we decided that we can't leave them like this. We have to help them. So we immediately we took our 10 by 10 tent, which I showed you before, and we built it outside in the parking lot. The hospital connected us to electricity. This is we're approaching nightfall, and we're afraid that they will be in some kind of a terrible life-threatening condition. And inside this tent, we built a NICU. This one is an incubator, a closed incubator for the sicker of the 4 children. These are open incubators, and now the team can come in and out and serve them. There's electricity. They even have an anti-mosquito device to kill the mosquitoes if they come in. But this is a very good tent, so they don't. If they close the door, it's really okay. They stayed in the tent for about 36 hours, and we got them on the plane back to Israel. Not back because they've never been there, of course. So this is one of the couples, and they had twins. Of course, this is a girl, this is a boy. That's the way you know them, and they are on their way home at this point. I actually joined the flight, and I came back with them to see that they come safe. We also did some teaching at local hospitals. This is not Connecticut, and this is kind of a last slide for those who have to answer too many questionnaires about what's happening in their life. And it's 1:30. I think we've made it just on time to help.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Moser. If anybody has any questions, you can type them in your chat box at this time, and he will answer some questions. Just answer.
I need this.
So the question is from somebody in Florida asking if he speaks the native language there, and were there translators always available?
So no. So there's translators that could translate from English to Nepalese, but then when we go to the remote villages up in the mountains, they don't even speak Nepalese. They have local dialects. So we need people who speak the local dialect and or people who can translate at least what's important from the local dialect to English. So that's important. Then I told you that sometimes we needed to use other languages, German, Arabic, whatever we could use.
Okay, the second question is, what do you think the greatest problem or challenge in global health is today?
One of the greater problems is to understand that there is a problem. Once you understand there's a problem, you can start planning on what methods are required in order to deliver the right answers or the best answers. And of course, they're not going to be there up front. You'll have to go through a few at the same time. Most of what we know as the Western world does not understand the extent of the problems that exist in developing countries. It's not always, or most of the time, it's not money. It's not the availability of drugs or devices. It's understanding the local culture and what can or cannot be delivered in a specific given time. So that's the real challenge. The next one comes from, how did you come up with
the idea to use a bicycle pump?
Okay, so the idea, since this particular organization, IsraAid, has been delivering international humanitarian aid for a long time, they came up with the idea. They knew about this problem from beforehand, from a few months before there, or a year before, there was the big typhoon in the Philippines that was. So they went there also, so they had the ability to kind of analyze what would be needed. So at least the bicycle pumps we knew that they could come helpful one day.
Okay, the other question, how integrated were the emergency responses from different organizations in Nepal?
Nil. There was no organization, no coordination whatsoever. We had to seek our own sources in order to find who can we help and where can we help. We had to join forces with a local tiny hospital in order to get what they call the temporary doctor permits so we could treat them. The UN tried to have a daily meeting on where the needs are, who is in need, what is needed, and try and coordinate the people who were pouring in from all over the world to help versus those who needed. There was absolutely no organization that could be relied on, and everyone had to find their own people to help or to be helped by. So it was a tug of war between chiefs of villages and those who had the availability to deliver the medical the goods and supplies and the intelligence.
Do you think enough help in regards to healthcare was given to Nepal after the earthquake, and why?
There obviously wasn't enough, but it was how to deliver the right amount of personnel and medical aid and help to the people who actually needed them in the field. That was more of the problem. One thing that people thought would be a problem is food, but actually Nepal produces enough food for itself, so that was not. And they also they eat rice and lentils. That's their main dish. And they had enough of that stored away because it was in the height of the kind of before the season. So that wasn't a problem. But there was a problem of shelters and how to build up all these houses fast enough so these people won't suffer from the monsoon rains and be washed away. And finding the right places to give them, and so they took out all the middlemen on the way. So that was more of a problem than the medical situation.
Did any psychiatrists work with the patients diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder?
Psychiatry does not really exist in Nepal. They don't really believe in mental health and healthcare in that essence. To that effect, so the organization I worked with also sends out right with us, and they stay for months and months and on end, psychosocial help. And they establish groups and they have talks and they help people all around the villages and they stay around for months, half a year sometimes, in order to kind of get the people back into order. Psychiatric help is not an issue. There's very, very few psychiatrists all over Nepal. They believe in local treatments and not in official medicine or psychiatric help that is westernized.
Okay, I think there's one more question. What did you consider the most rewarding aspect of your work?
Well, personally, I can attribute that I saved 2 lives of babies. That's my personal feeling. And it was contagious because the entire camp was so geared up with these 2 children, each one, when they came in, that they needed immediate treatment. They stopped everything else in order to save lives. So that the comradeship of being in a group that helps each other and recognizes the needs and kind of it makes you feel wonderful that you're doing something that you actually know it's going to serve at least an individual very well.
And the organization that sponsored your group, was it a public or private organization?
They're all private. There's no public organizations that are involved. There are governments that send in help, and they come in. Of course, they all geared and all official, but they come in huge envoys. And those huge envoys are not very effective when they are trying to kind of work in the fields. For instance, the largest envoy that came in from a government was actually the government of Israel, for the reasons I told you before. They sent in 260 personnel in 2 gigantic airplanes. They landed at Kathmandu airport and they put up a field hospital right nearby. It wasn't close enough to the field to be very effective, although they did pick in a lot of injured people, but it wasn't as effective as it could have been, as in, let's say, the Haiti earthquake from the previous mission.
And what was the biggest challenge you faced in Nepal that you wouldn't have to deal with in a traditional medical setting?
Understanding what the needs of the population. The traditional medical setting, what you call or what you refer to as the Western medical setting, is what we are taught and what we teach mostly also to you guys when you come in to learn medicine with us. We teach you to be doctors first and foremost, but then the added benefit that we put in is that we teach you how to be global health physicians, practitioners, health caretakers, and we teach you to think outside of the box. I know it's very un-American, but you need to know how to put up a water source and how to clean a toilet and how to negotiate with the local chief about what is important to deliver medicine-wise to his population, be it condoms or be it aspirins. I mean, you can't work in medical setting, global medical health settings without understanding the cultural aspects of most of these things. So everything is included in understanding what is important in global medicine that we had to deliver here.
Thank you very much for the presentation today. I want to again mention that a recorded copy of this webinar will be available online should you want to listen again or share it with somebody else. I'll provide you all with a link via email. At the beginning of next week, you'll get an email with that link for the webinar recording. Again, I want to thank everybody for their time and especially thank Dr. Moser for his time and sharing his experiences with everyone today, and really encourage you all to think about a career in global health. Thanks again for joining us today, and this concludes our webinar for today.